Since the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973, 63.5 million unborn babies have been murdered in the United States. And this practice has only increased since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. In 2019, before the virus and the overturning of the decision, there were over 629,000 recorded abortions in the United States. In 2024, 2 years following the overturning of the decision, there were over 1 million abortions in the United States. Yet, despite this prevalent evil, millions of Americans continue to support this practice, and it leaves us with this question: is abortion wrong? Well, I'm here to present a comprehensive analysis as to why abortion is not only wrong, but how it's a modern recapitulation of the ancient practices of child sacrifice. But before we get into it, I would love for you to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what you think. So let's get into it. Why is abortion wrong? Now, there are many ways to display the immorality of abortion, such as the argument from presuppositionalism, the argument from natural law, the argument from science, the argument from legality, and so on. But coming off a video where I heavily used presuppositional argumentation, I will be focusing on the latter three, namely the argument from natural law, the argument from science, and the argument from legality. What is the argument from natural law? Well, natural law refers to the moral order that is written into creation itself and then is discernible by humans. And in fact, Romans chapter 2, verses 14 to 15 teaches us this, saying, "Indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them." This means that apart from scripture, humans can recognize basic moral truths, such as do not murder, by things such as their conscience. Therefore, abortion must also be judged by what natural reason and the moral order of creation reveals to us about human life. In fact, we can look to biology, which shows that at the moment of conception, a new human organism exists with its own unique DNA that is separate and distinct from its mother and its fathers. And the natural end, or the telos of sexual union and conception, is the creation of a new human life. And so to intentionally destroy that life is to disrupt or frustrate the natural order. And natural law holds that actions that are contrary to their natural end are morally disordered. As an example, let's look to the government. The natural end of the government is to order society towards justice and the common good. So a disordered action in this case would be tyranny. When rulers use authority for personal power or oppression, they disorder the natural purpose of governance. Thus, abortion is both contrary to biological fact and to the moral order that directs us to protect life and preserve liberty. Not only this, but every human being possesses an inherent orientation towards flourishing, growth, and rationality, capacities present from conception despite not yet being actualized. And by natural law reasoning, rights and dignity are not based on what one can do at that moment, whether it be consciousness or self-awareness, but what one is by nature, a human being. And to deny this dignity based on size or age or ability is arbitrary discrimination, a violation of natural justice. Natural law also reveals that justice is rendering to each his due. To give an example of this, a worker is due his wages for his labor, and to withhold or shortchange this is unjust. As for the unborn child, it is a distinct human being with a right to life. And to deliberately kill this unborn child is to deny him or her what is naturally due. Just as slavery denied equal dignity to some humans on arbitrary grounds, and in this case on race, abortion denies equal dignity on arbitrary grounds, that being developmental stage. Therefore, abortion is an act of injustice against the most vulnerable members of society. And while natural law is noble apart from scripture, it is consistent with divine revelation. The idea that murder is wrong is seen in Exodus 20:13, which says, "You shall not murder." Also, this idea that human dignity and human rights are not dependent upon developmental stage, but are given by God at the moment of development within the womb is also shown in the Bible. We can see this here in Psalms 139, which says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. You saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." And we see a similar concept in Jeremiah 1:5, which says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." And lastly, we see the wrongness of shedding innocent blood in Proverbs chapter 6, which says, "There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood." Thus, reason and revelation agree. Abortion is an offense both against nature and against God's law. Next, let's address the argument from science. While science does not establish moral values, it does establish facts of reality. In abortion, the central question is, what is the unborn? If the unborn is not human, then there is no needed justification for abortion. But if the unborn is a human, then abortion is the intentional killing of a human being. Thus, science is crucial because it objectively answers the questions whether the unborn is a distinct, living human being. And in fact, embryology textbooks consistently state that life begins at conception or fertilization. For example, we can look to the Developing Human Clinically Oriented Embryology by Moore and Persad, which states human development begins at fertilization when a male gamete or sperm unites with a female gamete or oocyte to form a single cell, a zygote. This highly specialized, totipotent cell marks the beginning of each of us as unique individuals. At conception, the zygote has its own unique DNA, distinct from its mother and father. The zygote is alive, growing, metabolizing, and responding to its environment, meeting all scientific criteria for life. And thirdly, the zygote is of the human species, not a potential human, but a human in the earliest stages of development. And from conception to natural death, human development is a continuous process. There is no scientific line where a non human suddenly becomes a human. The stages of development, from zygote to embryo to fetus to infant to adolescent to adult, are simply labels for different stages and ages of the same human being. Abortion doesn't terminate a potential life, but an actual living human in development. And science actually reveals the humanity of the unborn through measurable milestones. The heartbeat is detectable 21 to 25 days after conception. Brain activity begins around 6 weeks, and there are measurable waves by 8 weeks. Evidence suggests pain perception as early as 12 to 15 weeks. Kicking, hiccuping, and thumb sucking are all seen within the first trimester. And viability can be as early as 21 to 22 weeks with modern medicine, and survival rates are rapidly and currently improving. Each of these developments demonstrate that the unborn is a functioning human organism, not just a mere clump of cells. We can also look to a 2018 study by Stephen Jacobs at the University of Chicago. And in this study, he surveyed over 5,500 biologists across the spectrum of political and religious beliefs. And 96% affirmed that human life begins at fertilization. And this consensus isn't theological, it's scientific. The only disagreement is not about whether the unborn is human, but whether it deserves protection and preservation. Next, let's look to the argument from legality. Law, at its essence, exists to protect life, liberty, and justice. And the most fundamental right recognized that any coherent legal system is the right to life. All other rights, whether that be property or liberty or autonomy, depend on being alive first. And therefore, if the unborn is a human being, as the science above showed, then law has an obligation to protect that life. In most legal systems, including the US, laws already recognize the unborn as humans in certain legal contexts. Firstly, let's look at fetal homicide laws. If a pregnant woman is assaulted or her unborn child is killed, prosecutors can charge the assailant with homicide. We can also look to wrongful death lawsuits. Parents can sue if negligent actions result in the death of an unborn child. Yet abortion laws often carve out an exception, allowing the same act, that being the killing of the unborn, to be legal if it's done with the mother's consent. And this creates a legal contradiction. The law both affirms and denies the humanity of the unborn depending on the circumstances. In the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution states that no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And if the unborn is a person, which both science and natural law show that it is, then abortion is a direct violation of this principle. Justice cannot be selectively applied. To deny protection to the unborn is to create a class of humans excluded from basic rights, similar to slavery and segregation in past eras. Also, law consistently holds parents to the duty of care for their children. Neglect, abandonment, and abuse are all illegal. And this duty arises precisely because children are dependent and vulnerable. Abortion violates the very principle of parental duty. Rather than protecting the most vulnerable, it authorizes their intentional killing. Law also prohibits discrimination based on arbitrary grounds, whether that be race, sex, disability, or age. And abortion discriminates against human beings based on developmental stage or location, that being inside or outside the womb. By legal logic, this is no different than excluding people from rights based on race or gender. Arbitrary exclusion violates the principle of equal justice in law. And to look at the historical precedent, ancient and common law traditions always condemned abortion. Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England in 1765 called abortion a heinous misdemeanor. In US history, abortion was widely criminalized before Roe v. Wade in 1973. And Roe did not discover a new right, it overrode centuries of legal protection. And just as the Dred Scott decision in 1855 wrongly denied personhood to African Americans, Roe wrongly denied personhood to the unborn. Both cases reflect legal injustice and were/are destined to be overturned by recognition of fundamental human rights. So, what are some common counterarguments and why are they wrong? The first one I'll address is the idea that the fetus is not viable. But viability is not the basis of personhood. A newborn is equally dependent on constant care. Without someone to feed, clothe, and protect them, survival is impossible. Dependence on another does not erase humanity. And furthermore, viability is a shifting standard tied to medical technology. 50 years ago, a 24-week premature infant would not have survived, but today many do. And in the future, even earlier gestational ages may be sustained. Basing humanity on a moving line of technology rather than on human nature itself produces absurd results. The dignity of human life does not rise and fall with scientific progress, but rests on the intrinsic fact of human beings in their nature and their intrinsic right to life. The second argument is that it's the woman's body. But the unborn is not a part of the mother's body, but is a distinct organism. From conception, the unborn possesses its own unique DNA, distinct from the mother's. In many cases, it has a distinct blood type and often even a different sex. No other organ in the mother's body possesses its own unique genetic code or potential for independent life. The child is biologically separate, though dependent, much like an infant after birth. Natural law also recognizes that parents are bound by duty to care for their offspring. A mother's relationship to her child is not one of ownership, but of stewardship and protection. So to deny this is to treat the child as property rather than a human being. And the last argument I'll address is the quality of life argument. Natural law rejects this utilitarian reasoning that measures human worth based by circumstances. Human dignity is intrinsic and cannot be erased by poverty, disability, or hardship. and to argue otherwise is inconsistent. No rational person would accept the killing of a 2-year-old child because it's in poor material circumstances. Yet, if such logic is unacceptable for the born, why do we not apply it to the unborn as well? The standard of human worth cannot shift with circumstances. Every human life, regardless of its quality of life, possesses inherent dignity and a right to protection and preservation. Ultimately, abortion is not just wrong or immoral, it is satanic. In the Old Testament, Canaanites would send their child into the fire as a sacrifice to their god of Molech. Today, men and women send their children to be extracted and killed and sacrificed to their own pleasure and comfortability. In both of these situations, parents are sacrificing their children to their God. In the Old Testament, it was to the god Molech, and today it's to the god of their self. And no one desires more for the torture and death of the most innocent of God's creation than Satan. And to partake in this practice of abortion is to play into the hands and the will of the devil. Ultimately, abortion is not just a political issue or a matter of personal choice or even a social controversy. It is a direct assault on the created order of God. And from the testimony of Scripture, we see that abortion is nothing less than the modern echo of an ancient child sacrifice practice, an act that aligns with the schemes of the devil. Therefore, to stand against abortion is not just to stand for life, but to stand for truth, for justice, and for the will of God. The fight against abortion is not optional for the Christian. It is a divine mandate to protect the innocent, to resist the works of the darkness, and to proclaim that every child from the moment of conception is wonderfully and fearfully made in the image of God. So, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts, questions, or contentions? If so, leave it in the comments down below and I'll be sure to respond. If you have any ideas or anything that you want to talk about or video ideas, leave that in the comments and I'll also respond to that. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video. And I thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.